Welcome to Stories Junction. Let's begin today's story. My name's Jack. I met Clara on a Saturday in early summer, the kind of day where the air feels like a warm blanket and the sun lingers just long enough to make you forget the world's sharper edges. I wasn't looking for anything, certainly not love. I'd driven across Riverton, a sprawling city with more strip malls than charm, to help my sister Emma with a community fundraiser she'd been roped into by her accounting firm. It was one of those feel-good events, kids running around with face paint, local bands playing covers, and volunteers like me stuck hauling tables or pouring lemonade for sweaty strangers. I was there out of obligation, not inspiration, but Emma had a way of guilting me into showing up. "You're not doing anything else, Jack," she'd said, smirking over the phone. She wasn't wrong. Clara was at the registration booth when I arrived, a clipboard in one hand and a pen tucked behind her ear. She wore a light blue sundress that caught the breeze, and her dark hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, a few strands escaping to frame her face. She was checking people in, offering quick smiles, and jotting down names with a kind of effortless efficiency. I passed by her table on my way to the drink station, and we exchanged a polite hey and some throwaway small talk about the sticky heat and the traffic on Route 17. Her voice was warm but distracted, like she was juggling a dozen things in her head. I didn't think much of it. She was just another face in the crowd, someone doing their part for the day. I went back to stacking plastic cups and dodging kids chasing balloons. If you'd asked me her name an hour later, I'd have shrugged and changed the subject. 3 weeks later, I saw her again at Emma's annual summer barbecue, a tradition she'd started when she bought her little house in the suburbs. The backyard was packed. Neighbors, co-workers, a few stray friends of friends, all milling around with plates of potato salad and cold beers. Clara showed up with Sarah, one of Emma's colleagues from the firm, who she'd met at a local book club. This time, Clara looked different, more like she belonged. No clipboard, no rush. She held a glass of iced tea, the condensation dripping onto her fingers, and her laugh carried over the hum of conversation and the sizzle of burgers on the grill. She wore a white linen shirt and jeans, her hair loose and catching the late afternoon light. I noticed her before she noticed me, standing near the picnic table, talking animatedly about some novel she'd just finished. Emma, ever the meddler, nudged me toward her. "Go say hi," she said, handing me a plate of grilled corn like it was an excuse. I rolled my eyes but wandered over. Clara glanced up as I approached, and her smile shifted from polite to something warmer, like she recognized me, but wasn't sure why. "Lemonade guy, right?" she said, tilting her head. I laughed, surprised she'd remembered me at all. "Yeah, table hauling guy too," I said, and that broke the ice. We talked for a while, longer than I expected. She asked what I did, and I told her I ran operations for a logistics company, overseeing shipments and warehouses, the kind of job that sounds more exciting than it is. She said she was a freelance graphic designer, working on everything from startup logos to wedding invitations. "It's chaotic," she admitted, "but I like the chaos." Her eyes lit up when she talked about her work, and I found myself listening more than talking, which wasn't like me. She asked about Riverton, if I'd grown up here. I told her I had, in a quiet neighborhood on the east side, where the streets were lined with old oaks and the houses all looked like they'd been built by the same tired architect. She'd moved here a few years ago from a smaller town upstate, chasing better clients and a faster pace. We swapped stories about the city's quirks, the overpriced coffee shops, the annual fair that always got rained out. By the time we drifted to the dessert table, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. She asked if I lived nearby, and I said I did, in a modest apartment across town, close enough to hear the highway, but far enough to sleep through it. The conversation felt effortless, like we'd known each other longer than we had. As the night wound down, she leaned against the fence, her glass empty, and looked at me for a moment longer than necessary. "Want my number?" she asked, her tone casual but her eyes searching. I nodded, handed her my phone, and watched as she typed it in, her fingers quick and sure. "Don't be a stranger," she said, handing it back with a half smile before rejoining Sarah and slipping into the crowd. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling like something had just shifted, though I couldn't name it. We started texting the next day. Short messages at first, jokes about the barbecue, a photo of her coffee mug with a snarky slogan. Then longer ones about work, music, the best taco truck in Riverton. Calls followed, her voice crackling through my phone late at night. Both of us too tired to hang up, but too stubborn to admit it. Soon we were meeting up, coffee at a corner cafe, dinner at a dimly lit bistro, walks along the riverfront on weekends when the weather was kind. It wasn't a grand romance, no sweeping gestures or love letters. It was gradual, like a river carving a path through stone. We fell into a rhythm, steady and unforced, and I liked how it felt. Like we were building something without a blueprint, just trusting it would hold. Looking back, that was the trap. When things start so quietly, so naturally, you don't see the cracks forming. You don't hear the hum of something breaking under the surface. Clara and I were good together, or so I thought, but the thing about good beginnings is they make you forget how easily they can unravel. By the time I realized something was wrong, it wasn't just a crack, it was a chasm, and I was already falling. Clara and I fell into something that felt like a life. Not the kind you see in movies, with grand gestures and tearful confessions, but the kind that sneaks up on you, built from small moments that stack up until you realize you're in deep. After that barbecue in Emma's backyard, our rhythm became a routine. Coffee dates turned into standing plans at the Rusty Mug, a cozy spot in downtown Riverton with mismatched chairs and a barista who knew our orders by heart. Dinners moved from restaurants to my apartment, where Clara would perch on the counter, sipping wine and critiquing my cooking with a grin. "More salt, Jack," she'd say, or "You're not supposed to boil the sauce." I'd roll my eyes, but I liked it. Her ease, her opinions, the way she filled the space. We'd spend weekends exploring. Clara loved planning, day trips to the bluffs outside town, where we'd hike trails lined with wildflowers, or evenings at the local drive-in theater, sharing popcorn under a scratchy blanket. I was more of a stay-home-and-read guy, content with a beer and a quiet night. But her energy was infectious. I'd grumble about early mornings, but I'd go along, her hand tugging mine as she pointed out a view or a quirky roadside diner. She'd say I was her anchor, the one who kept her from floating too far. "You're steady, Jack," she told me once, her head on my shoulder as we watched the sunset from a park bench. "You don't try to fix me." I took it as a compliment, though now I wonder if it was a warning. We dated for nearly 2 years, never rushing. It wasn't fireworks, but it was warm, reliable, like a fire you could sit by without getting burned. About a year in, we moved into a small duplex on the west side of Riverton, a place with creaky floors and a backyard just big enough for a grill. It was practical, close to her freelance clients and my warehouse office, with rent we could split without strain. Clara turned the second bedroom into her design studio, walls covered in sketches and color swatches. I set up a corner in the garage with a punching bag and some weights, a place to unwind after long days. We divvied up chores and bills like a team, no fuss. She'd leave notes on the fridge, reminders for milk or just a doodled heart. I'd fix the leaky faucet she complained about, and she'd thank me with a quick kiss and a "You're my hero." When I proposed, it wasn't a spectacle. I didn't want it to be. We were at a little Mexican restaurant she loved, tucked in a corner booth with chipped salsa bowls and mariachi music humming in the background. I carried the ring in my pocket for weeks, waiting for the right moment, but every time I planned something big, it felt forced. So, one night, after she'd finished her tacos and was laughing about a client who wanted a neon green logo, I slid the ring across the table in its velvet box. Her laugh stopped, her eyes widened, and for a second, I thought I'd misread everything. Then she teared up, nodded, and whispered, "Yes." She hugged me so tight I could feel her heartbeat, like she'd been waiting for me to catch up to her. We got married 6 months later in Emma's backyard, the same place we'd met. It was small, maybe 60 people, string lights looped through the trees, and a playlist Clara curated herself. She handled every detail: the wildflower centerpieces, the handwritten place cards, the cake with lavender frosting. I just showed up in a suit, said my vows, and meant every word. She looked at me like I was the only person in the world, and for that day, I believed I was. Everyone said we were perfect together, the kind of couple that just worked. Emma pulled me aside during the reception, her eyes glassy from champagne, and said, "You did good, Jack. She's the real deal." I believed her. A month after the wedding, I got a promotion at work, regional manager, better pay, but a brutal schedule. Longer hours, overnight shifts, trips to warehouses in neighboring states. It was a chance to build something, to secure our future, maybe save for a bigger place someday. Clara pushed me to take it. "We'll make it work," she said, squeezing my hand. "This is for us." So I said yes, diving into the chaos of training, travel, and endless emails. The first few months were a haze. I'd leave before dawn, come home after midnight, the duplex quiet except for the hum of the fridge. Clara was busy too, picking up new clients, her desk buried in mock-ups and coffee mugs. We'd cross paths, me grabbing a shower, her reheating takeout. A quick kiss, a tired love you, and we'd crash into bed. It wasn't romantic, but it felt like partnership, like we were building towards something bigger. Then the shift came, slow at first, like a tide pulling back before a wave. I'd get home from a trip, say, 3 days in a warehouse in Ohio, and Clara wouldn't ask about it. I'd mention a tough day, a delayed shipment, and she'd nod, her eyes on her phone, like she was waiting for me to finish. She stopped leaving notes on the fridge. The doodled hearts were gone. I'd find takeout containers in the sink, unwashed, and she'd say, "I didn't know when you'd be back, so why bother cooking?" Her tone wasn't sharp, just flat, like she'd already checked out of the conversation. I tried to bridge the gap, coming home early when I could, skipping a trip to stay for dinner, but it didn't land. She'd pick fights over small things. A forgotten grocery run, my shoes by the door. "You're never here," she said once, her voice low but cutting. I thought she meant physically, so I promised to adjust my schedule. But her eyes told a different story, one I couldn't read yet. One night, after a delayed flight from Kentucky, I dragged myself through the door, my bag hitting the floor with a thud. Clara was on the couch, her laptop glowing, her face blank. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile. "Miss me?" She didn't look up. "Were you gone?" she said, her voice so casual it stung. I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but when I sat across from her, her eyes were cold, distant, like I was a stranger who'd wandered into her space. That night, in bed, she turned away, her back a wall of silence. "Jack," she said into the dark, "are you even happy? With this job? With us?" The question hit like a punch I didn't see coming. "What kind of question is that?" I said, sitting up. "I'm doing this for us. The promotion, the hours, it's for the duplex, the bills, our life." She didn't answer, just pulled the blanket tighter, her silence louder than any argument. That was the first crack, the moment I felt the ground shift. I told myself it was stress, her clients, my job, the newness of marriage. But deep down, I knew it was something else, something I couldn't name yet. Clara was slipping away, and I was too busy holding up the life we'd built to notice how fragile it had become. What happened next would make me question everything. Not just her, but myself, and whether I'd ever really known her at all. The silence in our duplex grew heavier, like a fog that settles and doesn't lift. Clara's question that night, "Are you even happy?" hung in the air for weeks, unanswered, like a song stuck on repeat in my head. I tried to fix things, or at least I thought I was trying. I cut my work trips short when I could, rearrange meetings to be home for dinner, even surprise her with takeout from that Mexican place she loved. But it was like pouring water into a cracked glass. It just kept leaking out. Clara's responses were clipped, her smiles forced. She'd snap over small things, a coffee mug left on the counter, a light I forgot to turn off. "You're not even here when you're here," she said once, slamming a cabinet door. I didn't know what she meant, not really, but I felt the sting. I started wondering if I was the problem, if my long hours and tired eyes were pushing her away. I doubled down, trying to be the guy she called her anchor. I'd leave work early to cook, badly, but she used to laugh at that. Now she'd just pick at the food, her fork scraping the plate, her mind somewhere else. I'd ask about her day, her clients, the logos she was designing. But her answers were vague, like she was reciting lines from a script she didn't believe in. "Fine," she'd say, or "busy, you know." I'd nod, pretending it was enough, but the distance between us wasn't just in her words. It was in the way she'd linger at her desk late into the night, her laptop's glow casting shadows on the walls, or how she'd scroll her phone in bed, her back to me, the screen's light a barrier I couldn't cross. Then came the accusation, small at first like pebbles before a landslide. "You must love those trips," she said one evening, her voice sharp as she chopped vegetables for a salad she barely ate. "All that freedom, no one checking in on you." I frowned, setting down my beer. "It's work, Clara, not a vacation." She shrugged, her eyes avoiding mine. "Sure, but you seem happier when you're gone." I laughed, thinking she was joking, but her face stayed hard, her knife slicing through a tomato with more force than necessary. I let it go, chalking it up to a bad day, but the comments kept coming. "You ever get lonely out there?" she asked another time, her tone casual, but her eyes searching, like she was fishing for something I didn't know I'd hidden. "No," I said, steady. "I'm too tired to be lonely." She didn't laugh. It got worse. One night, after a long day at the warehouse, I came home to find her pacing the living room, her phone clutched tight. "You're late again," she said, before I'd even set my keys down. "I texted you hours ago." I checked my phone. Nothing. "Clara, I didn't get anything." She scoffed, tossing her hair back. "Convenient. You're probably deleting them, so you don't have to deal with me." I stared at her, my jaw tight. "That's insane. Why would I do that?" She didn't answer, just turned away, muttering something about trust. That was the first time I felt it. Not just distance, but a wall, one she was building brick by brick. Then came the night that changed everything. Clara announced she was going away for the weekend. "Sarah's got a cabin by Lake Huron," she said, tossing clothes into a duffel bag. "Just a girl's trip, no work, no stress." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes, and her movements were rushed, like she couldn't wait to leave. I nodded, trying to be supportive. "Sounds fun. You deserve a break." She gave me a quick peck on the cheek, her lips barely grazing my skin, and was out the door before I'd finished my coffee. I didn't think much of it. Clara loved her getaways, and I trusted her, or at least I thought I did. That night, around 11 p.m., I was sprawled on the couch, half watching a baseball game, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah, asking about a board game we'd played at Emma's last barbecue. Some trivia thing I'd been weirdly good at. I smiled, typing back, "You planning a rematch at the lake?" Her reply came fast. "Lake? I'm at home. Been binging documentaries all weekend." My stomach dropped. I reread the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. I called her, keeping my voice steady. "Hey, Sarah, just checking. Claire's not with you?" A pause, then, "No, haven't seen her in weeks." "Everything okay?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah, just a mix-up. Thanks." I hung up, my pulse steady but loud, like a drum in my chest. I didn't call Clara. I didn't text. I just sat there, the TV flickering in the dark, my mind turning over every moment of the past few months. Her distance, her accusations, the way she'd stopped looking at me like she used to. When she walked in next day, just past noon, she was all smiles, iced latte in hand, her sunglasses perched on her head. "Hey, babe," she said, tossing her keys on the counter. "The trip was amazing. We should do the lake together sometime." She kicked off her shoes, humming like nothing was wrong. I waited, my hands clasped tight, until she turned to me. "How's Sarah?" I asked, my voice calm but heavy. She froze, her hand halfway to her bag. "What?" she said, her smile flickering. "Sarah," I repeated, from the lake trip. "How's she doing?" Her eyes darted to the door, then back to me, her fingers twitching. "She's good," she said too fast. "Obsessed with those true crime shows, as usual." I nodded slowly, leaning back in my chair. "Funny. She texted me last night. Said she was home, watching documentaries." The air in the room changed, like the pressure before a storm. Clara's face went blank, then flushed, her hands stilling. "You're lying," she said, but her voice wavered, like she was trying to convince herself. "I'm not," I said, holding her gaze. "So where were you, Clara?" Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally sat down across from me, her arms crossed tight, like she was bracing for a fight. "Okay, fine," she said, her voice low. "I wasn't with Sarah. I waited, my heart steady but heavy. I was with Ryan, she said, the name hitting like a stone. He's a client, a photographer I've been working with. I leaned forward, my voice even. Is this a work thing or something else? She looked away, her jaw tight. It didn't start like that. My chest tightened, but I kept my voice calm. Did it end like that? She didn't answer, just stared at the floor, her fingers digging into her arms. Then she looked up, her eyes sharp. You want the truth, Jack? You've been gone. Not just on your trips, but here. You're checked out. I feel like I'm living with a ghost. Ryan, he sees me. He listens. I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I needed to keep moving forward. So this is my fault, I said, not a question. She stood, her voice rising. I'm not saying that, but I need more than a paycheck and a locked door. I need to feel like I matter. I didn't shout, didn't throw anything. I just stood, grabbed my jacket, and walked to the bedroom. You should have said that before you lied, I said over my shoulder. That night, I slept on the couch, the first time I hadn't shared our bed. The next morning, I called a lawyer, not because I wanted to, but because I knew I had to. Clara's lie wasn't just a betrayal. It was a door slamming shut, and I wasn't going to beg her to open it. What came next would test everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the life we'd built. And it would show me just how far Clara was willing to go to rewrite our story. The morning after Clara's confession, the duplex felt like a stranger's house. The air was thick with unspoken words, and every creak of the floorboards seemed to echo the fracture between us. I didn't confront her again, didn't demand more details about Ryan or her late trip lie. What was the point? She'd already shown me who she was, and I wasn't going to beg for a truth she'd only half tell. I made coffee, moved through my routine, and left for work without saying much. Clara stayed in her studio, the door half closed, her laptop humming like a shield. When I came home that evening, she was gone, her duffel bag missing, a note on the counter saying she'd be at Sarah's for a few days to clear her head. I didn't call to check if it was true. I already knew it wasn't. I met with my lawyer that week, a no-nonsense woman named Diane who worked out a small office downtown. She listened as I laid out the basics, Clara's lie, the distance, the name Ryan echoing in my head like a bad song. You want to file? Diane asked, her pen hovering over a legal pad. I nodded, my throat tight. Yeah, I'm done. She didn't push for details, just walked me through the process, paperwork, division of assets, mediation if it came to that. I didn't tell Clara right away. I let the decision sit, like a weight I wasn't ready to carry, but couldn't put down. When I finally handed her the divorce papers a week later, she was back in the duplex, sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red but dry. She read the first page, her fingers trembling slightly, then looked up at me. This is really what you want? She asked, her voice low, almost accusing. No, I said, leaning against the counter. This is what you chose when you lied to me. She flinched, but didn't argue. No tears, no apologies, just a slow nod, like she'd been expecting it. That surprised me more than anything. I thought she'd fight, or at least pretend to. But Clara had already checked out, her heart somewhere else, maybe with Ryan, maybe nowhere at all. The silence that followed was louder than any argument we'd ever had. The weeks after that were a grind of logistics and quiet resentment. We lived in the same space, but not together, like roommates who'd forgotten how to talk. I slept on the couch, my back aching by morning, while Clara kept the bedroom, her door closed most nights. We divided our life like a business deal. She took the car. I kept the duplex lease. She wanted half the savings. I didn't fight it. Every conversation was a negotiation. Every decision a tug of war. She'd throw bars when she could, small and sharp, like she was testing me. Ryan actually plans weekends with me, she said once, folding laundry with a pointed glance. He doesn't treat love like a chore. I didn't bite. Good for him, I said and walked away. I wasn't going to play her game, not when she'd already rewritten the rules. Mediation was worse. We sat across from each other in a sterile conference room, Diane on my side, Clara's lawyer, a slick guy in a cheap suit, on hers. She wouldn't look at me, her eyes fixed on the table, her fingers twisting a ring she still wore, though not the one I'd given her. We argued over furniture, the TV, even the damn coffee maker. Every item felt like a piece of our life being carved up, and Clara fought for things I didn't expect, like the painting we bought at a flea market, the one she'd laughed about because it was hideously charming. I let her have it. I didn't want reminders of what we'd been. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday, during a lunch break I barely used. I signed the last form in Diane's office, the pen heavy in my hand, then drove back to work and buried myself in spreadsheets. That night, I sat on the duplex small porch with a whiskey, the air cool and still. I didn't feel free, didn't feel anything, really, just a hollow kind of quiet, like the world was holding its breath. I thought that was the end, that I could close the book on Clara and move on. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, Emma called me, her voice tight. "You sitting down?" she asked. I was in the garage, tinkering with my punching bag, trying to keep my hands busy. "Just say it," I told her. She hesitated, then dropped the bomb. Clara got married. To that Ryan guy. Courthouse thing, super quick. A friend saw it on her social media. I froze, the wrench in my hand suddenly heavy. "Married?" I said, like I hadn't heard right. "Yeah," Emma said. "I'm sorry, Jack." I didn't say much, just thanked her and hung up. I sat on a stool, staring at the garage wall, my mind replaying Clara's words. Asterisk, he sees me. He listens. Asterisk, apparently, he did more than that. She'd moved on faster than I could have imagined, like our 2 years together were a footnote she'd already crossed out. I didn't spiral, didn't get angry. I just felt empty, like I'd been running a race only to find the finish line moved. I went back to work, to my routine, telling myself it didn't matter. Clara was gone, and I was better for it. But the universe has a way of twisting the knife. A month later, I was at a hardware store in Riverton, picking up a new faucet for the bathroom sink. I turned into the plumbing aisle and stopped dead. There they were, Clara and Ryan, standing by the pipe fittings, his arm around her waist. She saw me first, her face going pale, then red, like she'd been caught stealing. Ryan turned, following her gaze, and I got my first look at him. He was shorter than I'd pictured, wiry, with a scruffy beard and glasses that didn't quite fit his face. He wore a flannel shirt tucked into jeans, like he was trying to look like a guy who knew what he was doing in a hardware store. I didn't flinch. I just nodded, a small, tight smile on my face. "Hey," I said, my voice steady. "Hope you're doing okay." Clara's eyes widened, like she hadn't expected me to speak. Ryan shifted, his hand dropping from her waist, and mumbled, "Yeah, good." Clara forced a smile, her fingers clutching her purse. "We're fine," she said, her voice thin. "You?" I shrugged. "Getting by. Take care." I walked past them, my cart rattling, and didn't look back. I wasn't angry, wasn't hurt. Not in the moment. I was just done. But as I loaded the faucet into my truck, a laugh bubbled up, sharp and unexpected. Not because I was bitter, but because I saw it clearly now. Clara thought she'd traded up, found someone who saw her. But standing there, under the fluorescent lights of a hardware store, I knew who'd really walked away free. That moment should have been closure, but life doesn't tie up loose and so neatly. What happened next would show me just how much Clara's choices had changed me, and how much I still had to learn about letting go. After seeing Clara and Ryan in the hardware store, I thought I'd hit the bottom of whatever this was, grief, betrayal, or just the dull ache of a life that didn't turn out the way I'd planned. I drove home, the new faucet rattling in the passenger seat, and fixed the sink that night, the wrench in my hand a small anchor to reality. The duplex felt too big without Clara's things, her sketches gone from the walls, her coffee mugs cleared from the shelves. But it also felt lighter, like I could breathe without the weight of her expectations pressing down. I didn't hate her, not even after everything. I just didn't know her anymore, and maybe I never had. I threw myself into routine. Work was steady, shipments to manage, schedules to tweak, the kind of problems I could solve without second-guessing myself. I started running again, early mornings along the riverfront, the air sharp and the world quiet except for my footsteps. I fixed up the duplex, repainting the living room a soft gray, swapping out the old curtains for something simple. It wasn't about erasing Clara. It was about making the space mine again. Emma checked in often, bringing takeout or dragging me to her place for dinner. "You're doing okay," she'd say. Not a question, like she was willing it to be true. I gnawed because I was not great, not healed, but okay enough to keep moving. A few months later, I ran into Lisa, one of Clara's old book club friends, outside a coffee shop downtown. She spotted me through the window, waved, and came out, her sunglasses perched on her head like she was about to star in a movie. "Jack," she said, her voice warm but careful. "I heard about everything." She paused, like she was waiting for me to fill in the blanks. I just shrugged, sipping my coffee. "Yeah, it's done." She leaned against the patio railing, her eyes softening. "For what it's worth, I always thought you were too good for her." I gave her a polite smile, not sure what to say. She hesitated, then asked if I wanted to grab a drink sometime, just to catch up. Her tone was light, but her eyes lingered too long, and I knew what she was really asking. "Thanks," I said, keeping my voice even, "but I'm good." She blinked, surprised, like she wasn't used to being turned down. "No reruns for me," I added, softening it with a smile. She laughed, a little embarrassed, and we parted ways. As I walked back to my truck, I felt a strange relief. I didn't need to fill the space Clara left, not with someone new, not with distractions. For the first time in years, I wanted to know what it felt like to just be, without a plan, without a partner, without the weight of someone else's story. That clarity didn't come cheap. I spent a lot of nights on the porch, whiskey in hand, turning over what went wrong. Clara's lie about the lake trip, her quick marriage to Ryan, the way she'd turned me into the villain in her head, it all pointed to one truth. She'd been gone long before she walked out. I've been so busy building a life for us, paying bills, fixing faucets, taking the promotion, that I didn't see her slipping away. Or maybe I did, and I just didn't want to admit it. Either way, I'd spent too long trying to be her anchor, her steady, when what she wanted was a spotlight, someone to make her feel like the center of the world. I thought about the hardware store moment a lot. Not Clara's flushed face or Ryan's awkward shuffle, but my own reaction. That small, honest laugh as I walked away. It wasn't bitter or smug. It was the sound of seeing things clearly, maybe for the first time. Clara thought she'd won, that Ryan was her upgrade, her escape from a life she'd decided wasn't enough. But standing in that aisle, I saw the truth. She hadn't traded up, she'd just traded one set of problems for another. And me? I was free. Not from her, but from the version of myself that thought I had to fix everything to be enough for someone who'd already decided I wasn't. A few weeks after the coffee shop run-in with Lisa, I got a text from Sarah. She'd heard through the grapevine that Clara and Ryan were fighting, that the courthouse wedding hadn't led to the fairy tale Clara had posted about online. Sarah didn't have details, just rumors, late-night arguments, Ryan storming out, Clara crying to mutual friends. I read the message, set my phone down, and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, just a quiet detachment. Clara's life wasn't mine anymore, and her choices, good or bad, weren't my burden to carry. I kept running, kept working, kept fixing the duplex. I started small projects, a garden in the backyard, a bookshelf I built from scratch. I wasn't trying to reinvent myself, wasn't chasing some grand redemption. I just wanted to live on my terms, to stop measuring my worth by someone else's expectations. One evening, as I sanded down the bookshelf, Emma stopped by with a pizza and a bottle of wine. We sat on the porch, the air warm with the last of summer, and she asked, "You ever think about her?" I took a sip of wine, the question settling between us. "Not really," I said, and it was true. Clara wasn't a wound anymore, just a memory that faded a little more each day, like a road I'd stopped driving down. What I've learned since then isn't about Clara, not really. It's about me. People like her. They don't want partners, they want audiences. Someone to cheer, to validate, to reflect their version of the story. And if you don't play that role, they'll rewrite you as the problem. I used to think losing her was my failure, that if I'd been home more, planned more trips, been more like Ryan, maybe it would have worked. But now I see it. Clara left because she was already halfway out the door, looking for something I couldn't give her, because it wasn't about me at all. It was about her and what she couldn't find in herself. The first time I met Clara, she was just a face at a fundraiser, a smile I barely noticed. Now, when I think of her, that's all she is again, a stranger I passed by, someone I don't need to know anymore. I'm not bitter, not broken. I'm just Jack, living in a duplex with a new bookshelf and a garden that's starting to grow. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough.